Hi, and welcome back to my channel. I'm going to do something that I don't think I've done for at least a year now, and that is going to be a monthly wrap-up. This wrap-up is for May. It is currently June 2nd, and I've already read 4 books this month, so I'm doing good for June. But we're just going to talk about what I read for May and my stats through the end of May. We won't look into my June stats at this point. So, to start off, why don't we start off with my year-to-date as of May 31st, which was 227 of 450 books, which is my Goodreads goal for 2023. Now, usually I set my Goodreads goal as high as 500 or 525, but I've been having a lot of problems, so I decided to show myself some grace and lower that goal just a little bit, so therefore it's set at 450. So as mentioned, I have read 227 books as of May 31st. And with that 227 books, that brings me to 75,447 pages. Now, if I count the number of days in the year until the 31st, that means that I'm reading an average of 496 pages per day. Every day for January, February, March, April, and May, my average daily reading is 496 pages. Now, since I read 75,447 pages so far through the end of May, that averages to about 332 pages per book. Of course, some books are 400 pages, some books are 480 pages, but then there are 256-page books, 272-page books, so it averages to 332 pages per book. So, that is my overall list of how I did for the year as far as what I've read so far. But let's talk about what I did for May. Now, I might bring in some graphics for some of these numbers. I'm really not sure what I'm going to do. But for May, I was able to read 51 books. Now, I'm really happy about that because I am bringing up my spreadsheet, which I did not have loaded, is usually when I'm on the ball, so to speak, I can read 60 or 70 books a month. But things have not been easy for me. So I just want to give you an idea of what I mean. For January, I read 48 books. So remember, if I'm reading 60 or 70, January was 48. But then we get to February, the very next month, 28, 29 days in that month, and I only read 35. I did jump back up in March to 51 and lowered a little bit to 43 in April, and then back up to 51 in May. Now, I'm thinking that if I stay on the trajectory that I'm on right now, I should be able to get 60 books in for the month of June, but if I don't, that's okay, because there's only 30 days in June. So, with that 51 books, how many pages did I read in May? Well, it says here, and yes, I printed it out, I read 16,067 pages. So a little over 16,000 pages for the month of May. Because there's 31 days in May, if you divide 16,067 divided by 31, it shows that I read an average of 551 pages a day for the month of May. Now, the average per book is only 315 versus the 332 that I mentioned earlier. And that's simply because, like I said, you've got 400 some odd page books, and then you have 200 page books. So, it averages. Now, of these books, the breakdown as to how I read them go like this. 48 of these books were NetGalley electronic arcs, and a couple of those NetGalley arcs were also audiobooks. But I also listened to 5 audiobooks that I got from my library that were connected to series that I am currently reading. Now, with this, I do want to check. It looks like I had a sum total of 49 blog posts let's see what it shows here. Yes, I had 49 posts, but I had some series reviews. So I reviewed 67 books in May. So only 49 blog posts. Why? Well, some were series reviews, but there were also some scheduled upcoming reviews, even reviews that I have posted yesterday and today. So I've got maybe another 8 or 9 scheduled on my blog. So that's why I did 67 NetGalley reviews versus only 49 blog posts for the month of May. Now, every month I sign up for blog tours, usually almost every day of the month. Out of 31 days in May, I had 27 blog tours. Now, just for comparison reasons, I currently have, how many do I have scheduled for June? 35. I currently have 21 scheduled for June. Of these 21, I have read 2, 4, 6, 8. I have read 10 books of the 21 scheduled, and of the 21 scheduled for June, and I know we're talking about May, but of the 21 scheduled for June, I've already reviewed 6. So I am getting a little bit ahead. Not as far ahead as I'd like to be, but I'm getting there. So those are all my stats. 51 books, 16,000 pages, average of 551 pages a day, dozens of blog tours, dozens of book reviews, some audio books. I even had one print book, but because I also got it as an audiobook e-arc, I just went ahead and listened to it. So that's why I'm not showing you the print book. So before we go on to talk about the books that I read in May, why don't we talk about what my favorite books of the year were. Now, we're going to start with January. January was A Truth for a Truth by Carol Wire, and also Forgiving What You Can't Forget by Lynn Turkhurst. So A Truth for a Truth was a series book, and I was continuing that series, whereas Forgiving What You Can't Forget was obviously nonfiction / self-help book, but I thought it was an excellent read. For February, my favorite reads, there were 2, were The Little Flower Shop by Lori Foster, and also Cold-Blooded Liar by Karen Rose. I love Karen Rose. Then for March, I had a surprising favorite, and that was the new one by Evie Green. Why? Because it's kind of like speculative fiction, almost a science fiction. I know that I read this book months ago, but I just want to mention to you, a girl and her mother were injured in a car accident, and the girl was left in a coma. So the parents had the option to have an AI created of their daughter so that they weren't completely grieving her loss, and the AI would be their daughter. She would live with them, she would eat with them, she would go to school. But if her daughter happened to wake up, they could just simply deprogram the AI robot. But there was a major twist in this book, and that's why I remember it so much. But that was the new one by Evie Green. In April, I read A Light to Guide Us Home by Diane Haley, which I chose as my favorite read for the month of April, and that was a historical fiction. And then for May, I only put down one, or I put One Will Miss Her. I think it's I Will Miss Her. That's a typo. No One Will Miss Her. Okay, I'm sorry. I just had to look down a little bit. No One Will Miss Her by Kat Rosenfeld. But I have to say that Summer Reading by Jen McKinley should go into my notes as a favorite of the month of May. So I am making an addendum to my own notes to add Summer Reading by Jen McKinley in addition to No One Will Miss Her by Kat Rosenfeld. So those are all my favorites. I will pop up book covers to everything I'm talking about, so you'll be able to see what I've read, especially if something catches your eye. Now, I know this video is going to be a little bit long, maybe 30 minutes, 35 minutes, because there were 51 books. But I will try to bunch up what books I can. So as mentioned, the very first book that I read, the very first book that I read in May was No One Will Miss Her by Kat Rosenfeld. That happened to be one of my favorites of the month. So that was, let's see, I'm just pulling up my blog. Now, by the way, while I pull this up, I just want to let you know that almost every single thing I'm talking to you about will be on my blog. But for everything, you can always go to my Goodreads page, Robin Loves Reading, and you will find probably 95 to 96% of everything that I read reviewed there. The only reason you won't find the full percentage of what I read and reviewed on my blog is because some are scheduled. Like I have two scheduled for June 27th, one scheduled for June 4th, and one scheduled for October already. So therefore, you'll see them on Goodreads, but you won't see them on the blog. So what was No One Will Miss Her about? Well, here we have a woman who met an Instagram influencer, and it turned into a book about murder. Now, the thing is, our victim, Lizzie Ouellette, tells her story after she is murdered. So while the story is being investigated, there's a detective, Ian Bird. You have the investigative chapters going on, but you also have Lizzie Ouellette's POV. That's all I can say. Well, I'll say one more thing. There was a major twist. Major twist, which is why I went ahead and gave this book 5 stars. Then I read Close Your Eyes by Lisa Reagan. In Close Your Eyes, I want to see which one it was. Close Your Eyes is part of a series that I have been reading, and it happens to be number 17 in the Detective Josie Quinn series. Yes, 17 books in. And if I can, I might go to Fantastic Fiction and pop up a graphic of all 17 books. So I'll try to remember to do that. So what was Josie Quinn investigating in this book? Well, a young woman named Sharon Eddy had been murdered, and Josie finds out that this was connected to a murder from years before. And so you have a cold case and a current case that are connected in some way, and that's what Close Her Eyes was about. I loved it. I love Lisa Reagan, and I gave this one 5 stars. I need to be checking these off so that I don't stumble. So the next book I read was Little Lost Dolls by M.M. Chouinard, and that's another one in a series of a crime thriller ongoing series. So Little Lost Dolls was the 7th book. It's Joe Fournier. And I just had to check the number, but it's number 7. And in this particular case, it shows that it starts off with 4 women getting together for like a coffee. And then they make arrangements to go on a shopping trip, a little shopping spree. Well, only 3 show up at the shopping trip and 1 doesn't. And the one that doesn't show up is murdered. And that's what Little Lost Dolls is. But there's more than that. It's about the way the woman is murdered, especially when a second murder takes place, and then Joe and her team discover that there's a connection to the way that these murders took place. Then I read Murder at the Beauty Pageant, and a lot, if probably 80% of what I'm telling you about are all going to be connected to something that I've read. Most of them are. So Murder at the Beauty Pageant was 12 books in the Miss Underhay series by Helena Dixon. I love the Miss Underhay series, and her name from books 1 through 11 was Kitty Underhay. So the series is the Miss Underhay series. But if you read the blurb or you read other reviews, you'll see her name listed as Kitty Bryant. Why? Because she married the former Army officer named Matthew, so now her last name is Bryant. Well, she is keen when it comes to solving mysteries. So this is another cozy mystery, and I loved it. And the next book in this series is Murder at the Village Fair, and I already have that galley, so I'll be reading that one soon. Now, speaking of cozy mysteries, I read yet another cozy mystery, and this one was by Claire Chase, and this is Mystery at Fairfield Castle. Yes, again, another series book. Which one is this one? This is number 10 in the Eve Mallow series. Now, Eve Mallow is an obituary writer, but she goes further than just, say, writing a one-paragraph obituary for the murder victims or for the victims of death. She goes deeper into their lives, really gets to know them, and writes really comprehensive obituaries. But she also is rather adept when it comes to solving murders. So the murder of the woman she's looking into is a woman named Kitty, and Eve knows that it was a murder. So the 95% of the book, she's solving the murder. And then the last part of the book, she writes the obituary. I love reading her obituaries. Have I ever actually read an obituary just by opening up a newspaper? No. Have I read obituaries of family members or friends? Of course I have. But I love how this book really focuses on her solving these murders. Now, here's a standalone, and that is The Summer Holiday by S.E. Lines. And I read this one. I should be telling you this. Everything that I have mentioned thus far have been for blog tours. So The Summer Holiday was also for a blog tour, but it is not part of a series. It's it's a book where Kate and her husband are away from, they're away at a holiday in Spain. And she sees somebody, Kate sees somebody that she knew when she was at university, and her name is Coco. So she approaches her. And when she does, she invites Coco and her family for dinner. When Coco shows up at her house, she shows up alone. Oh, my husband was tied up with work, and my kids were doing such and such. And so every interaction that Kate has with Coco is just Coco. So the question is it a coincidence that Kate and her husband, Jeff, ran into Coco when they were on vacation? And the fact that Coco is suddenly front and center in their lives, and what is the twist? What is the major thing that makes this into a psychological thriller? Now, we know that by reading this book that Kate's very unfulfilled, very unhappy, okay? And in fact, one thing I kind of didn't like about this book, which is why I went 4 stars, is I don't really enjoy books that have dependency issues. And the dependency issue in this book is alcohol. Kate relied heavily on alcohol. But then she wasn't just an alcoholic to be an alcoholic, or she wasn't an alcoholic because it was an illness, so to speak. It was self-medicating. Why is Kate self-medicating? Well, when you read The Summer Holiday, guess what? You'll find out. So still a good book. I went 4 stars, and like I said, I probably could have went to 5, but I'm just a little reticent when it comes to alcohol or drug dependency. Then I read Secrets of Clearwater Castle, which is the first book in a new series by Emma Davies. Now, usually when I read Emma Davies, I read a different type of genre from her, but this is really good because it's not a cozy mystery. It's more like women's fiction with some romance. And I found that rather surprising because I'm thinking that it's going to be a crime thriller, but it wasn't that at all. Now, we have here Lowry, who has a young daughter named Wren, and she finds out that she was left an inheritance of a castle and all of its grounds, which are little homes and cottages on the castle. And her husband has been dead for 2 years, so she's wondering, why am I just finding out about this inheritance right now? Well, that's the mystery. Now, she's a determined woman, and the book is also billed as a romance. So remember, she's a widow of 2 years, so it's nothing unusual for her to find a new love, but she does. But it's the first book in a new series, Clearwater Castle. So let's see what happens in the next book. I don't currently have it yet, but I'm sure I'll have it in the next month or two, and I will definitely be reading it. Then I read Summer at the Cornish Beach by Donna Ashcroft. And I have to find it. No, I'm sorry. Summer at the Cornish Beach Cafe. Boy, I make some really bad typos, don't I? Summer at the Cornish Beach Cafe by Donna Ashcroft. And although it was a standalone, we have other books that are set in this particular setting by Donna Ashcroft. I have to say one thing that I said from my review. I said Summer at the Cornish Summer at the Cornish Beach Cafe was, in a word, perfect. So I don't know why I didn't put that as a favorite book of the month. Yes. Why? Because I wrote from the first tender scene to the warm and comfortable story to a beautiful conclusion. I love Donna Ashcroft. I think I have probably given the majority of her books 5 stars. Now, when I read this next book, this was Daydreams. This wasn't for a blog tour. This was just something in my queue. And I don't see the review. I'm just curious. I'm going to have to check that out. But with Daydreams, it was basically, if I remember correctly, this was more about a group of young people who were in a popular television show that only ran 1 or 2 seasons. It reached a lot of popularity and then it fizzled out. Well, now they have been asked to do a reunion show. And all of their lives, and I think there's 4 young people, and I'm just strictly going by memory. There's 4 young people, and their lives have all gone in different directions. And now they're trying to do this reunion show. And I thought it was a really good book, and I'm really a little confused as to why I don't see a review for it. But if I don't have a review for it, I will put one up because I remember the book. Then I read a book that has been in my Audible library for about 3 months now, and it is Spare by Prince Harry. Now, anybody familiar with the royal family in the UK, which I think is probably 95% of us, know that Prince Harry has pretty much walked away from his title and castle duties to live quietly. I believe him and Meghan are living in California now. They started off, they moved to Canada, and then now they're living in California. And he talks about his life. He talks about his young life. He talks about when he lost his mother, and he talks about his father and his brother, and obviously falling in love with Meghan, becoming a father himself, and why he left his duties as a royal. That was a really good book. I'm definitely going 5 stars. Then I read Happily Married by Victoria Jenkins, which is not... Oh, I just found my review for the Daydreams, but I already told you about that. Then I read Happily Married, and Happily Married by... That was Victoria Jenkins. It was a book about a couple that was anything but happily married. Now, this is a psychological thriller, and in this case, I wrote down from lies to secrets to gaslighting. This latest book by Victoria Jenkins caught me by surprise more than once. That is the first sentence of my review. Lies, secrets, gaslighting for a couple that's supposed to be happily married. That's all I'll tell you about that. I know I haven't been making book review videos. I promise I will get back to that soon, but that's Happily Married. Then I had Secrets of the Italian Island by Barbara Josselson. Josselson or Josselson? I think it's Josselson. Now, I love her books. They're always so sweet. Very, very emotional. Now, the thing about, yes, it's Josselson. this is Sisters of War #1. So it's the first book in a new series. And we have a woman who lost her grandmother, Annalisa, and she travels to Italy to find out about her grandmother. What happened in this book, which is what I really loved, is there were 3 sisters back like in the early, somewhere like I think 1943 or somewhere in there. And their father was ill. So the 3 sisters get on a boat and they travel to an island. And they want to work in the residence of a doctor who's doing research. And they know, I don't know, through word of mouth or through the grapevine, that his research could save their father's life. So that's the past. But then we have the present, okay? And the present is Mia, who wants to know about her grandmother, Annalisa. Now, remember I said there were 3 sisters back in the 40s? So we have Mia investigating her grandmother, Annalisa. And I'm sure that the other 2 sisters, whether through their own stories or their grandchildren, will have. So this is probably going to be a trilogy. That's what I'm trying to say. And I will be reading those other books. Lost my pen. Oh, there we go. Okay, so what's next? Murder at Abbey Mead Farm by Maren Allingham. Now, I think I have read maybe 4 or 5 books by Maren Allingham so far, and I've never been disappointed. I've always been satisfied, and especially with this book because it's the 6th book in the Flora Steele Cozy Mystery series. Now, if you know me, you know that I love cozy mysteries. And with this particular book, not only is Flora Steele investigating another murder, but she finds herself the victim of harassment. What is this harassment that she's dealing with? Well, my goodness gracious. Everything happens, even to the point where her favorite tree gets uprooted. Yes, so that is our mystery there. I feel like I have to move on because I'm only going at book 14 and I'm already 30 minutes in. Then we have Summer Reading by Jen McKinley. I'm just going to say this. I loved this book. This book, basically, we have a woman who had dyslexia, and the job she had at a bookstore didn't fit her life. Well, the question is, why was she working at a bookstore when she's not a reader because of her dyslexia? And who did she meet at the bookstore? And the fact that he loves reading above all things. That was Summer Reading. I think I'm just gonna speed through the rest because I could really wax poetic about just about every single book here. Now, I do have The Midwifes Child, and in The Midwifes Child, and this one was by, who wrote this one? Oh, Amanda Lees. It's another psychological thriller, and I'm sorry. It's a historical fiction. I just have to check it. In this particular book, we have a woman who helped to deliver a baby while they were in a concentration camp. And the mother fell very ill after she delivered this young girl. So our character, I just want to tell you her name, sometimes I will forget the names. Her name is Maggie. And she is determined to get this girl to her father. And she travels with this little baby. I think she's less than 2 years old. She travels with this baby to reunite him with her father. And along the way, so she gets help from a soldier. And so there's a little bit of a love story. I'm just going to turn this a little bit. Okay, so that was the 3rd book. So the next book I read is The Wedding Day by Sue Watson. Now, when Alice was married to her husband, Dan, they were unable to have a child. And they tried IVF and different methods, but nothing worked. And now she's alone, and she finds herself relying on alcohol in order to cope with the fact that not only was she not able to have a child, but she lost her husband. Well, one day she's in a shop. She's going to buy a bottle of liquor. And she runs into Dan with his very pregnant girlfriend. Well, something happens at that shop that has her fleeing to Greece. That's your book. she's in Greece. Dan and his girlfriend she's in Corfu, Greece. Dan and his girlfriend are there. Something happened at that liquor store that has a tremendous impact on what happens to to Alice. Now, I didn't make a note of this in my review, but I'm going to tell you that this book had what I call an open ending. So even though it had a conclusion, I did give it 5 stars. I just had to look down to double check. The ending kind of threw me. That's all I'll say about that. I know I said I was going to speed this up, but I can't. So then we have The Murder Affair, and this is by Alice Castle. And The Murder Affair is also part of a series. It's the Beth Haldane series, and it's the 9th book. Now, when Beth goes to a funeral with her elderly mother believes that she is the light and life. She was the light and life of the person that's the funeral is being held for. When she gets there, Beth's mother is not the only grieving woman. There's a bunch of women, all older, like in their 70s, weeping about the loss of this man. He was kind of like a Lothario. So his list, the list of suspects that could have been responsible for his death is huge because he had so many women on the string. What I loved about this book is that these are older women. I thought that was hilarious. Then I read The Revenge List by Hannah Mary McKinnon. Now, I'm not gonna, I guess I could, but because sometimes I won't come up with the name of the character. That's what I'm concerned with. But I can always tell you the story even if I can't always name the character off the top of my head. So, Frankie Morgan works for her father because her chance at a career in college was lost. So now she's working for her father. Frankie has a temper. Her father says, get some help. So she goes to an anger management class. She's in this anger management class, probably sitting there like this, like, what am I doing here? But she locks eyes with somebody. They leave the class. But before they leave the class, even before the class is done, the woman who's running the anger management class says, let's make a list of everybody that has wronged you and that you can try to forgive. So she composes this list in a journal, the journal that she also used for her work notes because she's kind of like a project manager at her father's construction site. Okay, so she meets this guy. They go their separate ways. She is either in Uber or at home and she checks her bag and her journal's not there. Remember, she made that list? That list was supposed to be called the forgiveness list, right? Well, somebody who found that journal has turned it into a revenge list. So accidents happen to this person that was on the list, to the next person that was on the list, to the next person that was on the list. She's trying to figure out who has this journal, and the only thing she can think about is the stranger she met at that anger management class. I had to tell you about that one. I couldn't just say the name of the book and the author because I think it was a great book. Then I had The Woman in Carriage 3. Now, I'm expecting this kind of to be kind of like a closed, a locked room type of drama because you have something that happens on a train carriage. So what is the story? Okay, you have people that are commuting back and forth to work. Up until an event happens, everybody's doing their own thing. They're on their phone, they're reading the paper, they're on their laptop, or their tablet. But somebody who rode that train regularly has been killed. So now all the people that ride the train are conversing with one another and making judgments and assumptions, and it becomes a murder mystery to see who killed the person in Carriage 3. So that's all I'll tell you about that one. Then I read Fractal Noise by Christopher Paolini. Now, the book I read last year was over 800 pages, which is, I think, something in the Sea of Stars. I want to pull this one up. Life in the Sea of Stars. I can tell you about Fractal Noise, but I want to tell you about the first book. I didn't write it down. All right, we have a fractal verse, and if you read To See Life in the Sea of, okay, I'm just going to pop the book cover up here because I cannot tell you the name of that book. In this particular book, we have a universe that, you know, people on a spaceship, and the Sea of Stars is life on the spaceship. Very, very complex book. Well, Fractal Noise is the prequel to the book that came out last year. So the book that came out last year was like over 800 pages. This was only 300 pages. But let me tell you why I wanted to give you a little bit of info about this book. I had this as an audiobook, so it's an audiobook review. What's cool about this book is that it had sound effects, okay? Now, you have a group of people, I think there's 4 or 5 people, traveling to try to find life, you know, space, and, you know, looking for alien life or whatever. Now, as they're traveling, things are happening to them along the way. But the sound effects is the closer they got to this cave, which was measured in ticks, like we could say meters or miles, but they had so far to travel. The closer they got, you would hear this thud, 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 as the narrator is narrating the book. So you might listen to 4 or 5 minutes of the book, and then all of a sudden you hear thud, thud, thud. And then the narration continues, and then you hear thud, thud, thud. And these are deep sounds like boom, 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 like that. Then you also have one of the travelers who is now a widower, and when his wife died, she willed him their digital memories. So their whole lives are in digital format. So the whole time that they're traveling, he's replaying these digital memories of life with his wife. So you kind of have 2 stories. And I just loved it. And I'm not into science fiction, but somehow I loved it. I don't know why, I don't know how. All I know is it was great. I'm so glad that I read it, and I will definitely be following the Fractal Verse series by Christopher Paolini for each book that comes out. Okay, I left this out, so I'm just editing in somewhere in this video. This is The Bride to Be by Daniel Hurst. Now, I did read another Daniel Hurst book by Booker Shore, but this is by Incubator Books, or from Incubator Books. And we have our bride, Kate, who's about to get married. So she is, I think, 1 week or 2 weeks shy of her wedding day, and she still hasn't picked a dress. So she goes to this bridal shop, and she's really debating on which dress she wants to pick. And she sees what she thinks is the perfect couple. He's handsome, she's gorgeous, they seem to have it all. How come she doesn't? In fact, why does her partner gaslight her, mistreat her, show his own form of domestic violence towards her? In fact, what about the new guy? The guy that she meets in the bridal shop? So she's the bride to be. There's another bride to be, but it's a twisted psychological thriller where we see that Kate comes up with a plan that's going to upset the apple cart, so to speak. And that is The Bride to Be by Daniel Hurst. I think I gave that one 4 stars. Then I read a book by K.L. Slater called The Bedroom Window. I've read quite a few of her books, and this was another psychological thriller of hers. And we have a woman who, her name is Lottie. And her husband had been previously injured maybe a year or 2 before, and he lost his job. Now he's back on his feet, and he takes on a job as head gardener or head groundskeeper. They have a little boy named Albie, and the people that he's working for seem to be very strange, but even though they're very strange, the wife of the man that her husband is working for ends up becoming a childminder for little Albie. Well, things are happening, and our woman Lottie has never even set foot into their house. There's some huge secret. more than that, sometimes when Lottie's washing dishes and she looks out her window, she feels like she can see a shadow in their home. Like there's another person there. Could it be a child? But wait, they don't have children. That's the bedroom window. Makes me think of the Rear Window, the movie Rear Window with James Stewart. But that's what it made me think of. All right, so then I have the Babysitter's Secret by Casey Kelleher, and that was again another psychological thriller. So what you're going to get from me in this video is psychological thrillers, cozy mysteries, and Amish fiction. So for the Babysitter's Secret, in this particular book, my review was very short, only 2 paragraphs. We have Sasha, who, let's see, she shows up at a house because there's a part of her past that's locked up in her brain, and she feels that if she goes to this house, it'll start to remove some of the fog from her brain, and the mystery of her past will be revealed. Well, when she gets there, the woman at the door is rushed. Oh my goodness, you're finally here. The kid's this, the kid's that, and I gotta da-da-da-da-da-da. So Sasha's like, okay. So she acts as if she is the new nanny. But it's a psychological thriller. So are these kids safe with Sasha? And how come her mother didn't vet this new nanny a little bit more, or the agency this nanny came from? Loved it. So then we go back to another cozy mystery, and this is Murder in the Scottish Hills, and this is by Lydia Travers, and it's part of a series. And mostly I think every book that I have read in this month of May is connected, and I have read the previous books. So in this particular book, it's only the second one in, and it's a Scottish Ladies Detective Agency. And I love this book because we have Daisy, who is a former lady's maid, and we have Maud McIntyre, and they have started their own detective agency. Well, guess what? They're having a hard time finding clients because they're women, and they're women in the age of Sherlock Holmes, and they get compared to him, and he's up here and they're down here, but yet they're trying to get their cases so that they can have some kind of a career as private investigators. So that is the Scottish Ladies Detective Agency, Murder in Scottish Hills. Loved it, and I will definitely be following every book that comes out in that series. Then I had My Word Against His by, trying to find it. I had so many. There we go. My Word Against His by Lauren North. Now, this was another psychological thriller, and here we have Celia, whose son Henry is about to go to college, so she's going to be experiencing empty nest syndrome. Now, just before her son Henry leaves for college, she meets a young woman from her past named Lucy. How does she meet Lucy? She gets a phone call. I need you right now. This was one of those books that left me like this. So I gave it 4 stars. Why? What happened to Lucy? How is she connected to Celia? What happened to her presently that had her contacting Celia? And what happens at the end? This is a book that you have to read to the last page because you might be as shocked as I was. I loved it. 4 stars. I only gave it 4 stars versus 5 because of the ending. I have to be honest, because of the ending. Okay, so then we have Her Last Promise. I don't know where it is here. I'm just trying to bring up these things here. All right. So Her Last Promise, this was by Catherine Hoken. Oh my goodness, I don't even need to look this up. As soon as I say it, it comes to me. Henny Winters. The 4th book in the Henny Winters series. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Now, the thing about this book is Hanny Winter, over the course of this series by Catherine Hoken, has been trying to get her father, a Nazi war criminal, brought to justice. And he's escaped justice every step of the way. And now there's just a chance that he might actually meet the justice that he's due. Meanwhile, Hanny and her husband are having major problems, not even living together. And they have a son who has started to fall in love with the ideologies of the Nazi war criminal father of Hanny. So now her and her husband are desperate to get their son back into their grasp to protect him from the Nazi ideology. Now, what I loved about this book is that it took place after World War II. And one thing I didn't bring up my book review, but one thing I remember about this book is I think it wasn't until I read this book that I realized that just because the armistice was reached and World War II ended, it didn't mean that everybody's life went back to normal. You still had the ideologies and principles of Nazi activity, and that was what was interesting about that. Then I had 2 books by Claudia Gray, and I will show you both of those now at the same time. And they are The Murder of Mr. Wickham and The Late Mrs. Willoughby. Now, I have never read a Jane Austen book before. Well, these are retellings of Jane Austen's books. So because I hadn't read Jane Austen before, and yes, I already have the books, I've had them for years, I just haven't taken the time to read them. Well, you have Mr. Darcy in the first book who's murdered, and everybody's a suspect. It's at a house party. And then there's a smaller house party in the second book, and there's yet another murder victim. So you have this younger couple, and they're like 17, 18 years old, and they successfully solved that first murder, and then they solved the one in the second book. So that was really, really good. And then I read Widow Lake was by Rita Herron, and I have read a lot of her books. And in this particular book, it is the eighth book. Yes, I'm just going to hold my iPad so I don't have to keep looking down. It's the 8th book in the Detective Ellie Reeves series. Now, here's where you think, okay, so where's this book going to go? Why? Because a little girl. There's 2 stories. A little girl is lost, but she's quickly found. Meanwhile, there's a father and his daughter, and he uproots her and moves every few months or every year. And before the little girl is lost, and before the father uproots his daughter for the umpteenth time, there's a little bit of a prologue about a murder. So how do you tie all these things in? And why is his father uprooting his little girl? Well, this is what Ellie Reeves has to investigate, and I thought it was a really, really good book. Okay, now, these next 5 books are from Rachel J. Good, so I will try to show you all 5 right now. And this is what series is this one? I did do a series review, so we're going to find out. This is a series review that I did read all 5, and I even wrote, it's the Surprised by Love series by Rachel J. Good. I wrote in my combined book review these 4 reviews, but the 5th book doesn't come out till June 27th, so I'm holding that review for that. Now, they are An Unexpected Amish Proposal, An Unexpected Amish Courtship, An Unexpected Amish Christmas, An Amish Marriage of Convenience, and Her Pretend Amish Boyfriend. I am ready. I can't even tell you which one I love the most because I think I gave all 5 of them 5 stars. Remember, Her Pretend Amish Boyfriend, you'll only find that review on Goodreads. You won't find it on my blog just yet. These books were all good. Now, Amish fiction is one of the best palate cleansers that I have found when I read a lot of crime thrillers, mystery thrillers, suspense, and psychological thrillers, because they're always clean, cold, closed door romances. Clean Amish fiction. Sweet, clean, squeaky clean. And if you like happily ever after with squeaky clean characters and morals, then you're going to love this series by Rachel J. Good. I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed this series, and I will continue to read anything that Rachel J. Good writes that I can get my hands on. But those aren't the only Amish fiction books. I also read her Amish of Apple Creek, the Amish of Apple Creek books 1 and 2 by Shelley Shepherd Gray. And I am just making a note to show you both covers at the same time. These were Happily Ever Amish and Once Upon a Buggy. Now, I didn't have Happily Ever Amish for review. I only had Once Upon a Buggy, but because I'm into continuity and I am a series fanatic, I read them both. Now, here we have Apple Creek, Ohio, okay? And our characters, like in the first book, we have Addie Byler, who likes Daniel Miller, but Daniel Miller has a problem that has prevented him from telling Allie that he likes her. That's pretty much the gist of that. And then in our second book, we have May Schott, who feels really bad that her friend Carl Hilly was seriously injured in a fire. When they were 16 years old, they snuck off in the barn. Barn got struck by lightning. She got off with some burns on her leg, but she was pretty much okay. Carl had a huge amount of burns and spent year after year after skin grafts and surgeries and so forth. So much so that he ended up becoming English because he spent so much time in hospitals. Well, now Carl is home and he wants to get reacquainted with his family. And then you have now him and May with their unrequited love and the fact that he's now English and she's not baptized Amish yet. So where does that go? Then it looks like I had 5 books by Amy Lilliard. I think the first 3 were connected, and the first 3 were, I want to tell you, which 3 were those? Well, I can't tell you right now. Oh, there we go. Paradise Valley. So they were Marry Me Millie, The Amish Matchmaker, and One More Time for Joy. Those were the Paradise Valley books. Then I read a couple of different books, but they were in my queue, and they were Happily Ever Amish and I already said that. They were An Amish Husband for Tilly and A New Love for Charlotte. So these books aren't connected, but because I had Amy Lillard books in my backlog, I decided to read them. I'll tell you a little bit about A New Love for Charlotte. Charlotte is a little older, like in her early 40s, and her daughter has gotten married and is pregnant. Her best friend, a woman of her age, is about to marry, and now she feels like she's going to be all alone. Well, love is in the cards for her. I'll just leave it at that. Then I had another Amish fiction, and I think it might be my last Amish fiction for May, was A Single Dad in Amish Country by Patricia Johns. This book really surprised me because our characters are not Amish. They live among the Amish. And this guy here, he had a little girl, I think it was a little girl, and every single mother in his daughter's class knows that he's a catch, but he's not interested in any of them. And I try to imagine what it's like to live among a group of people that you're not a part of, but he fits with the Amish. I loved it. I love Patricia Johns anyway. Now, David Rosenfeld has written the Andy Carpenter series, and I got books 27 and 28. They are Flop Dead Gorgeous and 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. Now, Flop Dead Gorgeous doesn't come out to June 27th, but of course I read it. And 'Twas the Night Before, The Bite Before Christmas doesn't come out till October, but I've already read that. If you love Andy Carpenter, then you're going to love these books. If you don't know who Andy Carpenter is a lawyer, okay? He's a lawyer who is retired, but he's not. Why? Well, Andy Carpenter, just like our author, David Rosenfeld, loves dogs. So if there's ever a situation that involves a dog and a client who really needs him, he takes on that case. And that's what happens with these books. But what I love about Andy Carpenter and our narrator, Grover Gardner, is Andy Carpenter is snarky, sarcastic, and witty, and also very intelligent. So when you're listening to these books, which if you have Hoopla or Overdrive, get them. You are going to be treated to a great series. It's not really cozy mystery because you do have some, serious crimes that take place and things like that. But then you have Andy's wife, Lori. You have Marcus, who is kind of their bodyguard. You have Sam, who is the accountant / hacker. Oh, my goodness gracious. I love that series. Love it. Then I had The Last Holiday by Amy Shepherd. And this one I think I have coming up. Let me see when I have this one. I can tell you in just a moment. Whoops, brought up the wrong link. So The Last Holiday by Amy Carpenter. Not Amy Carpenter. Did I say Amy Carpenter? No, Amy Shepherd. I'm still thinking about Andy Carpenter. So for The Last Holiday, I did publish this review in May. Okay, in this particular one, we have several college friends who get together to celebrate the 18th birthday of a girl named Rose. One of those people dies. Her name, I believe, is Annie. How does Annie die on this camping trip? What happened? And why does the past reflect what's happening now? And that's basically what The Last Holiday is about. Then I have My Daughter's Boyfriend by Daniel Hurst. Now, I feel like I left The Bride to Be. Oh, I did tell you about The Bride to Be by Daniel Hurst. Okay, so this is my second Daniel Hurst book. Now, The Bride to Be, I didn't mention, is from Incubator Books, but My Daughter's Boyfriend is from Bookouture, so he is published multiple locations. In this particular one, this woman is really shocked that they live in the UK and her daughter has a boyfriend that lives in the States, I think in California, and she wants to meet him. So the mother says, okay, you can go to California to meet, or to the United States to meet your man you're in love with, but I'm going with you. So they go. They travel across the pond. They meet the young man and his father. Something happens that makes the mother put them right back on the plane, head right back to the UK, but the drama doesn't end there. In fact, it's a psychological thriller, so we know there's some twist in there. And let me tell you, this is one, again, of a book that had an ending that you just like, oh my gosh, what could happen? But yeah, that was a good one. Then you have My Husband's House by Cheryl Brown. Now, in this particular book, a guy tells his wife, we're going to buy this house. But there's drama. And she's trying to figure out why did they even move to this house? Okay? And I'm trying to bring it up. Why did they even move to this house? What is, and this won't be out until Monday on my blog. Why did he insist that they move to this house? And what is the mystery of this house? And where is the mystery in this house? Okay. Now, her name is Naomi. And the thing about this is when they meet their new neighbors, and I think her neighbor is Sarah. Yeah. As soon as Sarah meets Naomi's husband, Ben, it's an instant dislike. Then when Sarah's partner meets Ben, it's even more antagonism. So Naomi's like, why don't these people like my husband? I think he's an okay guy. Well, it's a psychological thriller. So you know that there's something that has to do with the house, which is why it's called My Husband's House. Then I read Hold Your Breath, and Hold Your Breath is by Helen Pfeiffer, and it is part of a series where I have read all of the other books, and it is number 9 in the Detective Morgan Brooks series. And in this one, we have a young woman who's posed a certain way when she dies, and if they don't find the killer, then they know that this killer is going to kill again. The thing is the killer is obsessed with death masks. Now, when Morgan receives a death mask in the mail just before the first murder, she thinks it's a prank by her coworkers. Well, it's not a prank, and you have to find out what that death mask means, the victims that have been murdered, and why Morgan herself is in danger. So that's Hold Your Breath. And then we have The Homemaker by Cheryl Brown. This one I won't be putting on my blog until the 13th. Now, in this particular book, we have Jenna, who has some sort of psychosis after she gives birth. She is sure that her son River is alive, but she's told that no, he died shortly after birth. And then she has a neighbor who also has a baby. And then she has a husband whose behavior is suspect. I'll leave you with that. Then we have The Last Orphan by Kate Hewitt. Now, in this particular book, it's a World War II book, and it's right after World War II. I don't even think I've done any notes on this one. It's right after World War II, and in this particular case, you have a group of children who are now orphaned thanks to all the devastation that happened in the concentration camps. And our character, and her name, what is her name? Rosie. She sees one child that holds herself apart from the rest. This child is having grief, more grief it seems than most. And Rosie's attachment to that child, and to, I think, an American soldier she meets. Now, Rosie's not Jewish. The person that she's drawn to, not an American soldier, the person she's drawn to is Jewish, and the little girl is Jewish. But it's right after World War II. So how can Rosie save the young life, and how can all of these children that are now orphans be reunified with any surviving family members? And will this young girl that Rosie finds herself drawn to be, will she end up being adopted by an aunt, or will Rosie somehow manage to be able to keep her in her life? And that is, I'm sorry, I'm trying to close this. Oh, there we go. That is our story there. Very, very sweet story. Then we have There's Something About Greece, and it's a kind of like a sweet women's fiction / romance, where a woman travels to Greece, and it was there that she found something that will give her happily ever after, so to speak. No notes on that, no review on that yet, but that is book 51. This review video is well over an hour, but guess what? I'm going to edit in every single book cover, and I'm going to upload this video. If you make it to the end, can you tell me in the comments below if you like these wrap-ups and if you want me to do them? Because every month I say, no, I'm not going to do a wrap-up video because it's going to be too long. And that's what happened here. So that is my full wrap up. I will put a graphic with all the books that I have read for May, and I hope to hear from some of you in the comments as to whether or not you want me to do these every single month. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.